You mentioned David Chalmers and consciousness a moment ago. And consciousness might not fall under the typical umbrella of philosophy of science because it falls under typically the philosophy of mind. But since we've been talking about metaphysics, there are some metaphysicians who take a very robust view of metaphysics that have interesting views about consciousness. And I'm wondering, just since it's come up, what your views are on consciousness, given that you're a particularly science-minded philosopher. I'm not expecting your theory of consciousness, but maybe how you view it.
Well, you might not know this because it never came up, but my wife is actually an expert on this subject, and she has, I think, written the paper that refutes Chalmers' arguments.
Oh, great.
Have you ever looked at it? And I was in Phil Review some years ago, and she works on it, and has written stuff, and she's writing a book on this stuff now. But at any rate, and her teacher was a person who taught at Rutgers, who was a colleague of mine, named Brian Loewer. He died some years ago, sadly, but I think he had the key idea to show how to defend physicalism against the kind of arguments that Frank Jackson and then David Chalmers, taking Frank Jackson's arguments, developed into his dualist views. And of course, it's interacted with philosophy of science and quantum mechanics in a big way, because for a while in the history of quantum mechanics, people were making claims like consciousness collapses the wave function. In fact, Chalmers just got into a long conversation with Chalmers at dinner a few nights ago about he has actually developed a kind of version, a sort of more sophisticated contemporary version of consciousness collapsing the wave function view. You've heard of GRW probably. It's a spin-off of GRW view. So the two, you can't separate these things. Philosophy is all over philosophy covers everything. That's why one goes into philosophy, because you can't keep your mouth shut. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, but my question is more about how you think consciousness needs to be investigated.
Okay.
Let me just add one other thing.
I buy my wife's view and Brian Loewer's view. I think consciousness is a physical phenomena. I also think that because of the way we encounter our own consciousness, we will never come up with what we think of as a satisfactory explanation of how it can be the case that neurons doing whatever neurons do can result in something like there's something that's like, to whatever, feel a tickle in your nose or a pain in the butt or what it's like is supposed to be.
While we're on the topic of consciousness, which might be a good case study, to use that phrase again for this, and fundamentalia, the word emergence comes up often in discussions of physics and metaphysics, and it's a heated and charged word. People use it in different ways. What is emergence, and what's an emergent theory? What's perhaps similar in kind an effective theory?
Well, as you said, it's used in different ways. So if one means that certain kinds of things didn't exist at one time, and later on those things came into existence, sure, they emerged. At one time there were no mammals. They emerged. Okay. But sometimes what people mean by that is that there's no explaining how those things emerged in terms of what there was beforehand. If that's what they mean by no explaining, well, again, explaining means different things. If they mean by no explaining, we haven't discussed explanation, what it is. It's another big area in philosophy of science. But if they mean by that you can't come up with what you might think of as a satisfactory thing that you say, now I see, that might be the case. But if what you mean by that is that the world had to have more stuff in it in order to get that, then I don't think that's the case. I don't think there had to be anything in the world other than what there was before there were any mammals for there to be mammals. Mammals emerge very slowly, incidentally. We know that from natural selection, evolution. It takes a long time for everything to happen, so it's not an all or none matter.